you know, introduce us by saying, of course, both of these prolific creators are working with us at Virgin Comics. Deepak, Chopra, my dad, of course, is one of the founders of the company and been doing some amazing stuff with us, most recently adapting his New York Times bestselling novel, Buddha, a fictional account of the life of Buddha, into a graphic novel series. And then Grant, we're really excited, which we're going to show a trailer a little bit later of a new animated series, series of web animations that we're developing with Grant based on one of the most iconic Indian myths. But we'll get into that. But first, you know, let me just sort of set the foundation here by asking these guys, you know, why they're here, why they are on this panel together. We titled it The Spirit of Superheroes. I actually wanted the soul of superheroes. So I'm going to ask them to sort of talk in that context why they're here. Maybe I'll start with my dad to talk about, you know, what does the soul mean to him. He seems like a pretty appropriate person to ask that question. And Grant, you can talk about superheroes.
Hi, it's nice to be here. So, Gautam just asked me, what does soul mean? So I'm going to ask you to do something right now. As you're listening to me, listening to me? Yes. Okay, now turn your attention to who's listening. Turn your attention to who's listening. Do you feel a presence? A still presence? If you do, that's your soul. It's not your mind, which might be saying, I wish I'd gone to the bathroom before you started or something. Your mind is a conversation that happens in the presence of a consciousness that we call the soul. And in that consciousness are all your memories, all your dreams, all your fantasies, all your longings, all your aspirations, all your relationships, or what you would like your relationships to be. But in that presence is meaning and context, and also there are mythical stories. There is the collective imagination of humanity, the collective imagination of your ancestors, the collective imagination of your culture, of your religion. And that is what myth is. Myth, the word myth comes from the word mother, mater, matrix, matter, time, measurement, music. All of this comes from the highest level of the imagination that we are capable of. And so we kind of, in our depths of our soul, we link with that collective longing and the collective imagination of our ancestors, and from there we project future mythologies. And these inspire us to do what we would otherwise think is impossible.
Which brings us on to superheroes, I guess. I'm getting more fascinated by the fact that our culture has become obsessed with the notion of a superhero. And we kind of knew it was happening. All of us are interested in comic books. And I've been reading this stuff for a long time. Could see it happening over this last decade. And the superhero is kind of, I feel that it's rising in the consciousness, particularly of the West, as a desperate attempt to find a way out of a situation we're in right now. When I was writing All-Star Superman, which was my kind of way to get into the very basis of what the idea of the superhero was all about, in issue 10, we have a sequence where basically see the entire history of humankind's attempts to visualise superhuman beings or higher potentials. And so the novel opens with Aboriginals in Australia pointing at the stars where we're drawing Wandjina paintings on the rocks, trying to envisage what would people from the stars, what are these higher people, what are they, what is the potential we have. It moves on to a sculptor doing a sculpture of Krishna in India. Then we move on to what for me was the key for the whole thing. It's like back at the start of the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, Pico della Mirandola was a philosopher who basically laid out the stall for the Renaissance. And what is this whole message? You should read it one day because it's actually quite interesting. It's where our culture started in a lot of ways. And Pico suggested that humans were different from other animals and other living things because they were able to copy. They had a mimetic ability. adaptability. Other animals were driven by instincts and programs that they couldn't really escape, but what humans are capable of doing is actually reprogram themselves to be anything. Pico's suggestion was that, obviously he was a philosopher, so he said philosophy is the best thing you can be, because he was a philosopher and he thought that was the best possible thing you can possibly be. But what was interesting is he said, we need to live up to our stories, we need philosophy which gives an idea of a higher potential, because then we have something to live up to. And I get really interested in this idea of stories and the kind of stories that we tell ourselves and the effects that they have on us. And recently our culture for a long time has been telling us a really dark and bleak story, and it's the story of our own end and our own guilt and our own disastrous mistakes. And that story is now pushing us to the brink of disaster, because we keep telling it, we keep telling ourselves we're wrong, we've done bad things, we deserve to be hurt, our kids are harming themselves, and soldiers are bleeding on battlefields. It's not a good story. And what we should be doing is thinking back to what Pico said, you know, a long time ago, a really smart man, one of us, who realised that we need to give ourselves myths to live up to. We need Superman to look up to, because then we've got potential. Once we have Superman, we know where we should go. Superman's the way out. The superhero always wins, he always saves us, he always finds an answer to even the most intractable problems. And that concept, as an imaginative construct that we have invented, is actually maybe one of the best ways out of Western culture's deathlock right now. And I think it's interesting that all these superhero movies that come in, this figure of the exalted human, the one who's slightly beyond where we are, but still has ties to what we are, is trying to get us out, is trying to solve the problem, like to beat the villain.
The end of the 30 seconds, which is one, this is a sort of 5-minute behind the scenes, which we can show if you guys want to see it, but it's the last sort of 30 seconds. Alright, we'll show the whole thing. I'm going to give you a little bit behind the scenes. Kind of maybe give us context of what this is, why we're doing this together, because this is entitled MBX, and MBX is a reinvention of the Mahabharata, which is one of the great Indian epics that's 3,500 years old.
Well, I mean, to me, I think it's part of the whole exchange that we're talking about, you know, and as we say, Deepak's working on the life of Christ, and I'm dealing with Indian mythology here. And it just seems to be an appropriate time for us to be doing this kind of cross-cultural swapping, you know. I think it's time for us to exchange our ideas and to see where the correspondences are and the common themes. And also for us, coming from different cultures, to draw out things that maybe, you know, for me, haven't grown up in a Western Christian culture. I may not even be aware of certain things that Deepak will be able to spotlight from that culture. In the same way, me coming from Scotland, you know, a working class background in Scotland, trying to tackle this Indian mythology is going to maybe reveal aspects of it which may not have been revealed, you know, if I hadn't grown up believing in Santa Claus or whatever. So I'm coming from a very different perspective, and hopefully it will re-illuminate it, and again to bring it to people who are not familiar with it, and to try and see it in a way that makes it easy for the West to understand. I've likened it before to when the Beatles went across to India and discovered the ragas and the sitar music of India. And they didn't take it back wholesale because they weren't really capable of doing the sort of thing that Ravi Shankar could do. But what they did do was adapt it into Western forms and recreate it in a way that actually transformed Western culture for a few years. So we're trying to do something like that, to take these Hindu ideas or Indian ideas of storytelling, which are very different from the way we tell stories in the West, and recontextualize them so that everyone can understand it here and participate in that. So yeah, it's just, like I say, cultural exchange, the more of it the better. You know, next we need some Aboriginals up here, and we can start talking about the way that Hopi people see time, because it's very different from the way we see time, and it would be really useful for us to learn to see time in that way. And I'd like to see a lot more of that going on. So this is a little first step in the direction of getting the world to shake hands, basically.
I don't know, do we have it ready?
Should we speed it up this thing?
And I'm being told at least it's not ready. I don't know if we're going to be able to get it.
It's really good, just imagine.
Yeah, trust us, it's really good.
I know you've all got good imaginations, you can do it.
No, fairly not.
one of the things that happens when, say, Morrison decides to reinvent the Mahabharata is that even somebody would say how audacious to look at the 3,500-year-old tradition and even attempt to reinvent it in a sense. But you have to be audacious, because unless you look at this from an outsider's perspective, you keep in the same imagination. You repeat the mythology over and over again. And right now, in our time, in the world, we need to reinvent our mythologies because we need to reinvent our identities. There are 35 wars going on this planet right now, all of them in the name of God. We are the only species that kills our own kind in the name of God. The only species that is capable of racism and bigotry and hatred and prejudice, and now risking its own extinction. So this is a very critical time in our evolution as a species where we need a new identity. An identity that goes beyond race, that goes beyond ethnocentrism, an identity that goes beyond even nationalism. You know, great people like Krishnamurti have said nationalism, extreme nationalism, is a sophisticated form of tribalism. Einstein said nationalism, extreme nationalism, is an infantile disease, it's the measles of humanity. Eric Fromm, extreme nationalism is our form of incest, it's our idolatry. So when we reinvent mythology and create these new supercultural superheroes that are cross-cultural and trans-cultural in a sense, we are all redefining our identity. We're saying we're citizens of the planet, and even more, we're citizens of the universe. And therefore this has a very important function.
Well, again, in terms of, if we're thinking of this in terms of stories that we tell ourselves, and here's another example. Right now, in the West, if you read the newspapers, if you look at the media, the story is basically, as I said earlier, that we're in a state of now collapse. We're paying the price for everything we've done in the past that was wrong. Our economy's in collapse, our environment's collapsing, everything's going wrong, everything's heating up, the planet's becoming inhospitable to human life, potentially. That's the current story, and I watch the news every night, and it's hard going, man, you know, it's like, it's horror story stuff, and we never really get to hear the stories of little ducks being born and all the cool stuff. But right, imagine we living in this story right now, everything's bad, there's war, everyone's dying, kids are harming themselves. Let me tell you a different version of the story, and some of the people who've read my Invisibles may be familiar with this. Right, just as a potential, imagine this was the story instead. The reason all this is happening is because we are all one organism. There's one organism on this planet that is made out of stuff that came out of stars. The stars came out of the Big Bang in the current model. But basically everything came from the same place. All the particles in your body were present in the first moment of Planck time when the universe was created. Everything in this room was there. It's been here for billions of years. It's part of us. It's a constant state of exchange. So it's a living thing. On this planet Earth is one living thing. If you think about time, you can trace all of us back through those doors, out of this convention, back through all of our lives, back to our homes, back to being 10 years old, back to being 2 years old, back to being 1 year old, back to disappearing in your mother's womb. And she continues the trail back, and it goes all the way back to the first mitochondrial DNA 3.5 billion years ago in the ocean. It's the same thing. That mitochondrial DNA is still dividing in every single cell of your body. So imagine, all the bad stuff you've been told is actually, there's not a lot of us, we're not all here fighting one another. We're part of a single organism. It's a really beautiful organism. It's well designed because it was made to eat itself, to stay alive. That's what it does. The whole organism can consume itself, cannibalize itself, and still grow. Animals eat each other, we eat animals, we exchange energy. Imagine it's one thing. There aren't nations. Nations are just an illusion of this thing that's too young to realise what it is. It's a single entity. We're all its fingers, we're all its little bits. Imagine an arm with the fingers, and imagine them all painted different colours fighting one another. It's stupid, right? The only reason you do that is because you don't know what you are. So imagine this is the story. The entity that lives on the planet Earth is very young. It's developing. It's not aware of what it is yet. It's only starting to become aware. People like us have started to become aware and think about it. That maybe there is one thing. What if there's only one thing? What if it's very young? And what we're seeing on the planet Earth is the process of its development and growth, its evolution. It's a gigantic, multi-cellular organism with billions of eyes, billions of mouths, billions of minds. We are the cortex of this creature because we are particularly good at taking in information, processing it, using it. But dogs are the smell centres for that entity because dogs smell really good. Every part of it is experiencing its own existence on the planet Earth. Right, we think the environment's been destroyed. Well, look at a caterpillar on a leaf. If you watch the caterpillar on a leaf, it would seem to be destroying the very environment that gives it life. But it's not. What it's doing is powering its metamorphosis to become a butterfly. So imagine global warming is actually an incubation process for something that's about to be heated up to maturity. And what we are seeing now, the internet, the increased connectivity of the planet is actually its own dawning self-awareness. And there will come a moment very soon where things are hot enough and fast enough and strange enough and severe enough, in the same way that when you hit adolescence you're flooded with all kinds of hormones, you go crazy, you don't know who you are anymore. Imagine this singular entity, which is all of us right now, is going through the same process and it's fighting itself, like, what am I, what the hell am I, what am I here for, what am I doing? And it's about to happen. Imagine very soon, imagine you're living on a planet which is about to give birth to a hyper entity, which is growing. That's a different story. All the same shit is still here, there's still wars, there's still global warming, there's still seeming environmental devastation. But imagine that seeming environmental devastation is what's meant to happen. The organisms here feeds on the planet Earth and on the resources because they're also part of it. And then potentially it might leave the planet, it could go into hyperspace, the planet Earth will recover. You know, one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves as human beings is that the planet needs us to save it. We are the planet doesn't need saving. The planet has had mass extinctions that have wiped out 99% of terrestrial life in the past. The planet shrugs it off and makes new things. When we're gone, it will make new things. So what we should really be is think about not being gone, but being part of that process, and stop trying to fight that process, stop trying to fight one another, stop being the hand that's trying to grasp itself and crush itself, and recognise that, okay, we're this thing now, and things are about to change. There's a different story. It might not be true, but what if it is? Everything changes if you tell a different story.
You will now leave this room a different person than when you walked in.
All the same.
I'm going to spend 5 minutes watching the trailer, and then I see people lining up, and I want to make sure we get through as many questions as we can. So maybe we can.
One of the interesting things, obviously, when I was researching this in the history of the Mahabharata, back in the day, obviously at the beginning of the caste system, and one of the castes were identified with the warrior class, and in the Mahabharata story, what we're actually looking at is superheroes. These are the superheroes of ancient India. They're actually super warriors, the warriors with extra powers, extra abilities, extra nobility, no better noses. And it's kind of, that's what I like, really trying to get a superhero concept to take something like this and readapt it, because those were the superheroes of the ancient world, and they exactly map onto the type of superheroes we have now.
I want to jump into the questions and make sure that we answer as many as we can.
Hi, I believe there really is a growing awareness of this idea of collective consciousness and metaphysical ideas from the implications of quantum physics, all of that. And I'm hearing a lot of language from you that remind me of readings that I've done. I'm specifically curious if the idea that various cultural myths surrounding the astrological event in 2012, if that's captured your imagination, if you're finding that people are talking about that anymore.
Awesome, yeah. Clap if you want. No, I've been interested in that whole 2012 thing for a long time. Again, anyone who's read The Invisible suppose that it was based around those ideas. I don't know if it's a thing that will happen. It's interesting, again, we've created another apocalyptic date for ourselves, so we have to at least do something before it happens. Who knows? Terence McKenna, he did his own version of this, the time wave zero idea, that time is a fractal wave. Yeah, good old Terence, I come up. He came up with the notion of the time wave, which is that history is a fractal pattern and it repeats itself whenever in decreasing cycles. And we're now in a part of the cycle where the doubling of information on the planet, and I'm talking about the last time I read about this was in the 90s, and the doubling of information is happening once every 18 months. I presume it's getting even faster with the development of computer technology these days. So there is still a way in which McKenna's idea of that was rushing towards some kind of singularity in time still holds some water. I mean, we're all going to be here probably, you know, I mean, but barring accidents, most of us will be here to see it, so it'll certainly be interesting. See you all here in 2012 San Diego, you know?
I think the answer is actually depends on us. We can use 2012 as a marker for a shift in our collective consciousness. And that is a great idea. If we harness our collective intent, collective creativity, it could be a leap in consciousness.
Yeah. Well, let's choose it as a date to make things happen. You know, it's another story we're telling ourselves. But if we tell ourselves the story that on 2012 the entire human race is going to experience a mass consciousness shift, which will change everything, then maybe we'll make it happen.
So before, when I die, I will soar with angels. But when I die to the angels, what I shall become, you cannot imagine. That's the next leap.
First off, I'd like to thank you both. Okay. I was introduced to George Orwell's 1984 at a very young age. Grant, you dealt with that extensively in the narrative of The Invisibles. I would like to ask you both to expound upon a little bit, how do we escape from Room 101? And how do we bring O'Brien along with us?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. How do we escape? Well, I don't know. I mean, the great thing that Orwell gave us, that story of ultimate human wreckage. You know, that story is about taking the idea of a human being and taking it to its lowest possible destructive end. You know, by the end of that book, Winston Smith is finished as a human being, he's finished as a rebel, he's finished as anything meaningful, he's just yet another adjunct of Big Brother. So, by giving us that nightmare, he's not only given some really bad people on the planet some really good ideas for how to mess with us, he's also given us an understanding of what that process might lead to. And it's not very cool, you know. It's like the idea in 1984 is a really dull political endgame where everyone's controlled by one vague virtual father figure who no one ever gets to meet but everyone has to bow before. He gave us a picture of our worst possible selves, you know. I think that's all it is. I don't think we're trapped anywhere, you know. And if we're trapped with them, they're trapped with us, you know, like Russia. Watchmen, they're trapped with us, and we're smarter. You know, they might have the guns, they might have the bombs, we're smarter, so we have to think of ways around it, we have to think of ways under it, and you have to also understand that even O'Brien had to go home and eat his dinner that night. And in 1984, George Orwell doesn't really go into that because he's given us a myth. O'Brien is a satanic figure, but in the real world, people aren't satanic. In the real world, people are just like us. Even bad people still have to go home, and even bad people have things that they love, and even bad people have to sit and strain out a really painful shit. So they all have to live in the same place as us, and no matter how long, no matter how many thousand years they think their life might endure, they will be dead within 100 years. So don't be scared, they're just us too, you know. And I say don't be scared, which is easy when the knock comes in the door at 4 in the morning, you better be scared. But we can't afford to be scared because right now, until that knock comes in the door, there's no need to be afraid. Those guys are desperately trying to find their own way out of it, and their own way is very unimaginative, and it involves controlling people, because really they're scared that we're all going to do something bad to them, because in their heads they want to do something bad to us. I always think it's really funny that it's in Britain, my government now has 5 surveillance cameras for every human being on the island. 5? I've got 5 of my own cameras. I feel great. I feel like Keanu Reeves. So if you want to put all those cameras on me, then I'm going to give you a fucking show, you know? So don't be scared. Try and work with it. You know, if people fill your streets with cameras, then go out, dress up, and put on plays. Do things, act. Because the one thing those guys don't want is cameras in their bathrooms. But if they put a camera in my bathroom, I'll give you a show, dude. But Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and George Bush, they don't want to give us a show. They're scared. They don't want us to see into their rooms. I've got nothing to hide. They've got lots to hide and they're afraid.
We have time for one more question.
I was really surprised when you started to mention the issues with nationalism and how it's sort of this big problem that we're all dealing with. And so I was just curious as to how you both thought American comics, which mainly deal with, petty crime in these imaginary cities, should adapt to dealing with these problems like environmental devastation and, 3 million people who are sex slaves every year.
I think that's a very important question, and that's where comics, books, and or new mythology has to go. We cannot live in a world which does not have 3 million sex slaves. 50% of the world lives on less than $2 a day, of which 20% lives on less than $1 a day. When you have such extreme disparities, and you see how these are inseparably connected to the sex trade, to economic devastation, to ecology. You look at a simple thing like Hurricane Katrina, and you see the web of relationships. Hurricane Katrina is not just a natural disaster. It's global warming, it's the disappearance of marshlands in the state of Louisiana at the rate of an acre every 24 minutes. It's deforestation in Sri Lanka, and it's Abu Ghraib prison, it's the disappearance of shorelines, it's Guantanamo Bay, it's the Iraq War, it's social injustice, and it is our collective rift in our collective soul. I think where our new stories have to go, they have to address these problems. Otherwise, we're being very parochial.
Close on,
in terms of, I think, maybe in the past superhero stories did deal with, petty crime. I always find it quite amusing that Batman is a super rich aristocrat who beats up the poor. We all love him for it. But to say that that's not what those stories are about, you look at, again, we'll bring it back to The Dark Knight because I know everyone's seen it. Yeah, it's a story about crime, but it's not really a story about crime. It's, as Deepak said, it's a story about duality. And you've got Batman on one side, you've got the Joker on the other side, in the middle you have the tragic human figure that is Harvey Dent, who's cut down the half, and one half is the Joker and one half is Batman, and it's tearing him apart and it destroys him. So I think our next move is to find a way to not be Harvey, but to integrate the beautiful chaos and the makeup and the glory and the sexiness that is the Joker with the order and the sanity and the aristocratic arrogance of the Batman, and combine those in ourselves to make one beautiful new thing. One face.
I want to thank both of you for being here. It's always, I think, appropriate for this to be one of the final panels because it seems to be about so much more than just Comic-Con and kind of the entertainment we're all here to see. But this is awesome, and I hate to you guys who have to follow up this panel. Thank you guys for being here.